Welcome to The Freight Break with your host, Dan Lindsey, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the trucking industry. We're talking real conversations, real relationships, and real insight that keep the wheels turning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Freight Break, the flagship podcast of the Broker Carrier Summit, the BCS Freight Network, and your go-to podcast for navigating the logistics and transportation industries. I am your host, Dan Lindsey, and each week we bring you insights from industry experts to help you win the freight game. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, let's go ahead and kick it over to Ty Software.
Meet Ty Software's workflow automation, built to help LTL and FTL freight brokers boost productivity. Use custom prompts to automate repetitive tasks like status updates, carrier changes, and shipment alerts right in the platform. Manage operations with automated scheduling, carrier management, and real-time updates. Workflow automation removes bottlenecks, freeing you up to grow your business. Best of all, it's easy to set up and use. No coding or tech skills required. Choose your workflows and Ty does the rest. Book a demo today and see how Ty makes efficiency happen.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this segment of Breaking It Down. Today, I have the privilege of talking with my good friend, Todd Waldron with Truck Stop. Todd, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on, Dan. I appreciate it.
Good. How has the summer treated you so far?
It's good, but it's incredibly crazy how fast it's gone. I sent my kids back to school yesterday morning, so I was a big milestone at the end of the year, and now I look forward to gearing up for conference season. And the weather temperatures here in Minnesota are dropping fairly rapidly, so trying to prepare my mindset.
Yeah, they are in Indianapolis too. We had a 20% or 20 degree rather swing in the last 2 weeks, so it's not looking forward to that. We're supposed to have a nice nasty winter. So
yeah, we've had 2 mild winters the last 2 years, so I wouldn't be surprised if I haven't checked the Farmer's Almanac, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be a rough one.
Yeah, well, hopefully that means that rates are going to increase. I know that weather is one of the things that really dictates that. I don't pray for bad weather, but you know what? If there's going to be bad weather, then somebody might as well get paid for it for being out in it. But let's talk. It's been a couple of minutes since we've had a conversation. A lot of things have happened in the marketplace in the last, 3 months. I want to start by talking about the state of the industry in general as a whole. I was talking with Mike Riccio a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking about the broker market and how it's still in very much a consolidation type of environment. There's been some consolidation in the freight tech side as well. Talk to us about that. And you guys have made some big moves in the last couple of weeks. Talk to us about how Truck Stop is being positioned and what you see next on the horizon for you as well as for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen a lot of change. We welcome back our founder, Scott Moskrip, as our CEO, who will now be with us for the extended period of time now. And so we're excited about that. And we just see such a momentum in innovation in the ways that we interact with and learn from our customers. So a lot of things happening very quickly, which is exciting. We acquired Denim, freight payment, factoring, back office automation, which is super excited to see them join the team. They had a lot of very strong technology-based platform that really will help continue to round out the solutions that we're bringing to carriers, right? And brokers for that matter. And so that's definitely something that's very exciting. And then looking at and talking about like, what are the ways that how do relationships changing with AI, agentic AI coming into the picture and growing? And what's that mean for relationships between brokers and carriers is another big focus area in conversation. But from a market and industry kind of position as a whole, I was leading a company that was acquired end of 2024. And so definitely experienced firsthand the consolidation that's taking place in the industry. But it's been this challenging time of so many unknowns. You know, I watch the market updates weekly, and you continue to see little slight upticks here and then a little bit backstepping here. We're still seeing numbers that generally are pacing above last year, but nothing that's like this last week. We saw some incremental increases in volumes and rates, but nothing that's showing us a meaningful change or shift taking place yet. The other thing I've been paying attention to is potential regulations from an immigration and potential driver impact, which could be significant over the next few years here as another thing that's kind of looking to impact what everybody's seeing. But I think the unknowns are the trickiest thing to manage. It's so hard. I ran an asset-based carrier. I've ran a brokerage. And as you step into RFPs and commitments, trying to navigate retaining business, the market rates with profitability, and what's the short term for this year, but then also what's the long-term best thing for this organization, and how, and now, unfortunately, those conversations are pressing deeper into a need to focus on sustaining the organization versus, having long-term commitments and what the long-term best thing for a customer relationship might be, which we'll see in typical market cycles. So yeah, it's definitely been tough, but at TruckStop, we're focused on listening to our carriers, listening to our brokers, and what is the technology that will continue to help them interact more effectively and efficiently.
Fantastic. So let's dial in on that relationship piece a little bit. So you come from Q carriers, right? Couple of things. How did your time there, because you were there for 5 years, right? 4 or 5 years?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How did your time there inform you of what carriers go through, what their challenges are? And you mentioned it when it came to the AI piece. You asked the question, I think it was rhetorical, but I'm going to draw that out a little bit. What does agentic AI and the way technology is moving, what does that mean for carriers?
Yeah, absolutely. From a learning perspective, looking back to the time at Q Carriers is incredible. Not only learning on our asset side, how we engage with our shipper customers and our broker customers, and our mentality in balancing committed freight and published freight versus spot freight, and how we approach that and how our relationships play out in each one of those categories. But then also from a driver perspective, just sitting down in the driver's lounge on a regular basis, talking with the drivers, hearing their struggles and challenges that they see on a daily basis was incredibly informative and impactful. And then learning the ways that they look at problems in the industry, in the ways that they also like to interact with systems and technology and things like that is I think drivers are open to technology. But unfortunately, some technology people try to bring into the market is actually more complex. And you talk to the drivers and there's a much simpler way that they might think about a certain problem or a way to see something. And that if technology met them with their thought process or the way that they've discovered to handle things, they're more open to adopting it. And so taking that and applying it into, what's the mentality of TruckStop and how we deliver solutions? We don't always have to over-engineer or bring about some new, huge, innovative way to do things. There's often very simple workflow things that can make a meaningful impact. So I think those were some of the primary ones. As we look at agentic AI, I've always been a huge relationship focused person, and I believe in the strength in relationships and the value that people provide in the transportation ecosystem and how we execute freight. With that said, I think agentic AI is in a unique position to take away and continue to take away routine or mundane tasks that impact both drivers and brokers, giving us more time to enable deeper relationships and have more meaningful conversations if we're able to take and convert that time. What I've seen so often with like carrier sales reps converting to a sales role where the workload was pushed to them versus now it's kind of pulled on them. Oftentimes that they extend their busyness into more of their time. And so they don't replace that time with productive activity on the sales side. In the same way, if agentic AI frees up our time, are we going to just spread out our work to meet what we're comfortable with? Or are we going to develop new ways to build meaningful relationships? For drivers, I think the biggest challenge is interacting with folks that might poorly implement AI solutions, right? And that knowing when you need to have a person there to support the drivers. I have one story. I'll be brief, but I rode in a Waymo down in Phoenix, back at the TCA conference, and I trusted the robot.
I saw those last week when I was there. Oh,
it's
man,
wild, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I trusted the robot to get me from point A to point B. I had no concerns with that. But then I left my cell phone in the car and then drove away. And so I could go online, put in a request to get my thing back and get an automated email saying, we're working on it. We'll respond to you within 24 hours for lost items. I have a flight the next day. I don't have time for that. And so I'm calling, finding someone to talk to, and then even looking up the location online and going to the location to find somebody in person, because I need to know that something's being done and help validate what's being done in that situation. And so I just think I look at that and apply it to technology in transportation and say there's so many exceptions. I always say exceptions overtake the rule in transportation. That we're just going to have to be mindful of. And that can pose a big challenge for drivers if not done properly.
Yeah, I always classify logistics as a Rubik's Cube, that every time you solve it, it adds a row.
Yeah, that's good.
Every time you think you have a solution, like something else is added or something breaks on it. And that's one of the frustrations. I've talked with a lot of carriers through the last number of years when it comes to technology, because carriers are the slowest to adopt new technology in the industry. They're the most technologically averse. I think a lot of people mistake that for meaning that they're not technologically savvy. A lot of the carriers and the drivers, they are fairly technologically savvy. They just don't know how different solutions solve the problems that they need to be solved. Or the tools are not, like you mentioned earlier, they're too complex or too complicated. They're not simple enough to solve the problem. So what, for drivers specifically and for carriers and fleets as well, what tools are out there, or what tools is TruckStop rolling out for the carrier, for the driver, to help simplify the load booking experience?
Yeah, we have a lot of things coming down the pike. And some of the ones we've recently released, one is the authority age filter. Something that seems super simple, but yet saves a significant amount of time, and we receive great feedback on it. And so the problem is that brokers, especially with the increased instances of fraud, have been more stringent on their authority length of time, or length of time of carriers had an authority. And so carriers would pick up the phone or email and contact a broker and be told that they're not able to work with them because they're only been in the industry for 6 months or whatever that time period has been. And so we've added this authority age filter to the load board and enabling a carrier to see what a broker's requirements are, so they can filter out all the useless junk that might not be pertinent to them. In the same way, somebody who has increased or more tenure can work with those brokers that have higher requirements and potentially get higher rates. And so we've received great feedback on that. It just really helps cut down on the time spent. We're working on and adding deep links to be able to deep link for a carrier into a broker's portal or a broker system. And so if that's how the broker prefers to be interacted with, it gets them closer into that workflow. And then also like load visibility or views. So you can see how popular a load is and how many times it's been viewed. If a load's been viewed many times, there's a higher chance that it might be booked or covered. If a load hasn't been viewed or viewed less, then you might have a better chance of gaining that load. So those are some of the examples. And we're also looking at how do you deepen relationships. So private loads we launched about a month ago, enabling brokers to be able to publish or to post loads just to the private network first, and then to the more TruckStop approved wider network, and interact with carriers that they have approved via RMIS on their system. So those are some of the things, with a whole slew of other things coming down the pike. Looking at how do we build a more mode specific, more tailored experience to the carriers, cut out some of the noise and junk that might not be pertinent to them. How do we deliver them a more consistent experience with their mode or their workflow.
Yeah. And so what's been the feedback from carriers, specifically when it comes to the private loads and the tools that you've been rolling out in the last couple of months? Has it been well received?
Yes, it has been very well received. There's some concerns around a private load concept and how that might work. But when we talk through how it's going to look and feel, I think there's been a lot of good feedback on that as well. It doesn't look at carrier size or anything like that. It looks at who has worked with these brokers in the past and enables that communication has been historically done via email or phone call, when a broker, before they post a load, is going to email maybe a subset of carriers, which this is even a kind of a wider net than that says, I might not work with this broker weekly or even monthly, but I've been approved to work with them. And so now it opens up for me to see bigger opportunities with who I'm already engaged with and working with. But yeah, and then the authority filter has received great feedback. And a lot of people it's really helped them save time for sure.
Yeah. Well, and so I was a broker for, almost 12 years now. And one of the most challenging things as a broker is getting that first load from a shipper. Right. Likewise, I think one of the most challenging things, especially for a new carrier or a younger carrier, is getting that first load from a broker, from a reputable broker. So when it comes to the tools like private loads and different access to different brokers, what is the threshold? Are there different thresholds? And how can carriers best position themselves to get the most number of opportunities possible through utilizing those tools?
Yeah. And so like today, there's some basic logic tied to RMIS and the carriers that they have interacted with and the carriers that are approved to work with them. And then, so I would say one is just continued engagement, maybe pre-setting up and qualifying potential brokers that you want to work with and ensuring even outside of, if they have a load that you particularly want, if there's someone you want to build a relationship with and kind of get more engaged with, have conversations with them about your business and who you are. I think the downfall or one of the big downfall for the good, well-performing carriers with the increased fraud is that these requirements have often made it difficult or added barriers to building new relationships. And so phone conversations, building kind of, information about who you are, being aware of your online presence and what's been reported and talked about you on maybe the various sites that are more crowd shared feedback is another one. We're working with a few different companies and looking at a few different partnerships and also building out additional resources that help give more reputation to reputable carriers, because that's the downfall. Is the data doesn't always show in the same way that any business relationship happens, on the same way with brokers that might not be trustworthy. Building out and knowing who you're talking to and knowing more of the information and what they are, where they're based, what they do, and more about their business. I think that helps all of us build relationships. So communication, talking to more and more people and helping to put their mind at ease so that you're actually putting a face to the business transaction that's taking place, is certainly things that can help to kind of break down those concerns.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like a hiring decision sometimes, right? So there's always the thing where, they looked great on paper, right? But you get them in the room, or you actually put them in the chair to do the job, and you're like, oh dear God, this is not what I expected, right? That happens a lot. So it's refreshing to hear, especially from tech companies and tech platforms, that relationships are a priority. And I'll put this out there. It's not, I wouldn't guess it would be a great shock. Load boards in the past, and I think presently as well, they've kind of been blamed, rightly or wrongly, for the commoditization, the transaction-based environment that we find ourselves in freight. And I think there's some truth to that, sure. But how are you helping carriers and brokers move beyond the transaction? And you mentioned agentic AI, you mentioned fostering relationships. How are you guys helping to facilitate that in that process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that has been like the evolution of load boards, and that they clearly serve a purpose in the industry. And a lot of people are negative on load boards. A lot of people are negative on brokers, and that perception has changed so much over 10 to 15 years because brokers have actually taken ownership of and owned their responsibility in the equation versus just trying to back away when something goes wrong, right? And so as we look at what our role in the industry is, things like the private loads was a step in that direction of recognizing that there's multi-tiers of relationships between brokers and carriers, and that giving the tools to be able to manage those multiple tiers of relationships is going to continue to be impactful, and going to continue to help brokers execute at the service levels they need for their business. And so that's I would point to that as like being a focus of what we'll see from Truck Stop over the coming years is more tools that are geared around understanding who I'm working with. We already have stringent requirements on who we allow into our load board. There's this perception that load boards are completely open. I can't speak to competitors in the space, but I can speak to the years of data and database that we house, the amount of information and research that we do before we allow individuals in to interact in the load board. It's not a public or wide open load board. And so that's been one area is continuing to evolve and develop the security tools to sign up to be a Truck Stop participate. But then also like, what are the additional tools like the authority filter, load views, just other things in reputation you were talking about a lot is how do we balance the need to score brokers and carriers, and how do you build the reputation type of score and feedback, et cetera, while at the same time not wrongfully hurting people where false accusations might take place. And so focusing a lot on that is the reputation and the awareness and helping develop this online presence for carriers and brokers that can only help deepen relationships. AI comes in to then help and manage. I mean, what percentage of phone calls might a broker get of carriers that are fraudulent or not meet their service requirements, et cetera? If we take that out, we can deepen our relationships with those people that actually meet and mesh well with us as an organization. And so that's one example of how, agentic AI might start to step in and free up our time to build meaningful relationships.
Fantastic. Well, we mentioned earlier that the market is it seems like it's kind of finding a stabilizing environment. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. What do you guys see throughout the rest of the year? Is it more of the same? I know we're going into bid season here very, very soon. So talk to us about what carriers and brokers can expect and how is the market looking from where you sit into 2026?
Yeah, I would expect more of the same throughout this year. I would say that the one of the things, like I mentioned, watching closely is what the regulations and impact is of certain immigration related or English speaking related regulations that might drastically reduce available driver capacity over the next year to 3 years. And so that's one that I think could start to lead into a 2026 impact. What happens with weather is always an unknown. And then what kind of happens through bid season. I'm hearing from more and more carriers that in the RFPs are pushing back on pricing and coming in with rate increases and some having success. And so if we start to see some of that momentum taking place, the big unknown is what's going to happen with demand, right? If we get into a recession and demand starts to drop, then we have even additional overcapacity over that newer levels of demand, which could be just continue to extend this kind of downfall. But we're seeing some leveling with some positive signs of increases taking place in both a volume and a rating standpoint. But again, it's just this continued fluctuation where some weeks are better than others. But I would say, yeah, we're going to be into 2026 when we start to see a meaningful increase. I think major weather, after the holidays and into January, February could be impactful, even though it's getting into an off season. But yeah, we'll see how the holiday. I'm really interested to see how holiday shopping and things like that go, especially as consumer credit levels and debt levels continue to increase, what that's going to look like and how that might impact supply chains and inventory levels going into the new year. But
yeah, it's really interesting watching how everything in the economy is interconnected, whether it's interest rates, whether it's tariffs, whether it's import, export, all that. Yeah, getting into the freight broker's chair almost 15 years ago, I would not have guessed that this is what we would be talking about as heavily and as deeply as we're talking about it now. We'll have to have you back on here in a few months as we get into the new year to talk about that. I also like to pick your brain about some of the things at that point that we're seeing in the marketplace. You mentioned it, the English language proficiency, the B1 visa program. There's all kinds of stories coming out now of fraudulent CDL programs in different areas of the country. So I'd love to have you back on at some point and talk through that and the impact that's having on the market as well.
Absolutely. Yep. I've been looking at some numbers that are pretty significant. So
yeah, it's scary out there, my friend. So. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much, Todd. I know you have a full schedule, so I don't want to keep you beyond what we had agreed to. But go ahead and thank you very much for your time, and I will see you soon.
Dan, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that's our show for today, everyone. Thank you very much for listening and tuning in. Also, be sure to head over to brokercarriersummit.com to find out what's going on within the BCS Freight Network and to sign up for the next Broker Carrier Summit or an event near you.